Hi, this is Roger. Thanks for dropping by. It's not light yet, but I'm filming now because I've got things to do today, so I probably won't be doing any more filming today. It's a warning shot, I'm afraid. You'll have to make your own conclusions and do your own work. But I've had somebody put a comment up on the last video. You can go and have a read. They had some trouble with some Oncidium types and probably took them into an Orchid society or something like that and actually got them tested for viruses, and they turned out to be positive. The test kits are available. Peter White sells them in the UK on his site. Whether those test kits are any good or not, I don't know because I've never used them. But the difference between a true virus, which I'll have to state is pretty rare in orchids, quite honestly. It's not something you should believe is happening to all your orchids. Most of the time viruses get blamed for other culture related problems. You know, you get some yellowing on leaves and things like that and you think, oh, I've got a virus. So it's more likely to be something else, either a culture related problem, some sort of deficiency, too much light, light that comes through in a patchy form, like under artificial lights you can get yellowing and damage to the higher leaves that are closest to the lights, and the rest of the plant looks fine. So you really need to determine what your problem is, and most of the time the most likely thing is what it is rather than something obscure. Viruses do not occur very often. A couple of the main ones are ring spot virus and mosaic virus. Ring spot seems to affect Oncidium types more than other types. Mosaic virus is something that occurs in Cymbidiums, probably more than other types. I'm not an expert on viruses. All I know is that if an orchid has a virus, there is no cure. You can spray it with whatever you like. If the plant's got it, it's got it. And its ultimate conclusion will be that it will die. Some orchids can live with a virus for a very long time. They don't do as well, but they seem to just hang in there. And it's mainly the more vigorous types that live with it. But the problem is, if you've got a virus in an orchid, there is potential for it to get into other orchids. It can spread. But with viruses, the most common means of spreading it between plants is us. Its actual gets in mainly through damaged tissues, so it's non-sterilized tools, even your own hands, you know, when you're handling roots and things, when you're repotting. There's always some damage when you repot, and it's those damaged areas that allow that transfer in the main. You know, I mean, viruses start out in the air, which hopefully that helps now that it's actually working, and it's going to stay on now. Yeah, the problem with the comment was that when those plants were tested, the person involved thought it was because they were sharing water and thought that is how it spread. Well, yes, that's possible, but not the highest likelihood. It's more likely to be unsterilized tools, but therein lies the problem I've got with the comment, was that the people involved said that the 70% rubbing alcohol isn't a good enough sterilizer for tools. It doesn't work properly. Personally, I'm disputing that. There's a difference in its use. If you wipe your tools, you know, with some rubbing alcohol dipped in cotton wool or something like that, it's only going to be there for a very, very short space of time because it evaporates really fast. There's a hell of a difference between doing it that way and actually standing your scissors in the rubbing alcohol and soaking them permanently while you're using them. And you only take them out to use them and you put them straight back in again. I'm pretty confident personally that works fine for the use we put it to. You can do your own research on the properties of the whatever it's called, rubbing alcohol, but it's the 70% that's important. I have looked up in the past that the stronger the alcohol content, it becomes less effective. 70% is the recommended, sterilizer, basically. It's not ideal to put on your hands, quite honestly. It'll dry your skin out, and we are people after all, not surgical instruments. But I'm quite happy that that works okay for me. But you do your own thing. You can flame your tools, preferably in a blue flame, rather than a yellow flame. Otherwise you'll get soot all over your tools, and then you've got to clean that off, and cleaning that off is probably going to reinfect them. So take care with your cutting tools. But just remember that viruses are pretty rare. They're not, it is said that if you've got a large collection, you've probably got an orchid with a virus, and the chances are it was brought in with it. You didn't catch it. It was brought in from somewhere else, where perhaps the cleanliness wasn't as observed as you might do yourself. But both the ring spot and the mosaic virus, it's in the name. The effect that shows on the plants is quite distinctive. You do get yellow rings with the ring spot virus, not spots, rings. They do have a distinct pattern, and the mosaic virus is as it says. It's a mosaic patterning within the leaves as the cells are degrading, basically. So, there's pictures on the internet. You can go and look these things up. While we're on the subject of nuisance values of orchid collections, bugs and other sorts of things, we all get them. And they've all got treatments that can work, but there are quite a lot of recommended treatments that really don't work. And in my experience, a hard-learned lesson, the types of bug treatments that work on suffocation, the soapy wash type things, are effective if the bug is totally covered in the stuff. It just basically stops them breathing. I found that practically useless on scale. It just didn't do the job. That's why they got a hold and knocked out quite a lot of my Tolumnias. In my book, if you get pest infestations, get the proper stuff and use it as recommended, and use the repeat treatment at the appropriate interval. You stand the best chance of knocking them down and hopefully eradicating them. They'll still come back. They seem to get in somehow or other. And again, a lot of bugs are brought in on plants from other places, where perhaps they haven't done treatments. At this time of year, I only do spot treatments for bugs, and I'm not doing it very often because I haven't got many, hardly any in fact. So, but the ones you're most likely to come across are aphids. You can knock them down with practically anything. You can wash them off with water. They die easily, so any type of spray will do the job, and the soapy wash spray will probably work fine for those. I very rarely get aphids in here, but they do get in sometimes, occasionally. Mealybugs, if you get them, deal with them properly. If you see a nice big fat adult, I take great delight in just squashing the flipping thing. But just because you've squashed the adult doesn't mean you've got rid of the mealybugs, because it could have left eggs lying around which you really can't see, so they're still there, and then they'll hatch out, and then you think, oh, they're back. Yeah, well, they never went away. You need to deal with them. Get a proper systemic pesticide. And even though choices are limited depending on your country, try and get the proper stuff. Other bugs you can get. Mealybugs are relatively common in orchid collections. Scale, there's several types of scale. Again, they're quite difficult to get rid of, but a good systemic, they are all biting insects. If you get that systemic in the plant and they take a bite out of it, they're brown bread. It's quite a simple process, so unhatched eggs that hatch out and take a bite because they're hungry, well, they should go. So good systemic. The other one you might come across is spider mites. There's several types of those. They can be difficult to shift, but I think a lot of it is because they are pretty mobile. So you see them on perhaps one plant and you treat it, and there's already a few that have migrated to a couple of other plants nearby, and because there's only a couple of them, you don't know they're there. I mean, they're virtually invisible. They can be seen, but they're very tiny. They tend to hide underneath the leaves. And if you get them bad, you'll see the little webs forming, little silvery webs on the undersides. And if they get really bad, they'll migrate to the top sides of the leaves as well. But they tend to like hot, dry atmospheres. Well, your orchids don't like hot, dry atmospheres. So by avoiding that, you limit the amount that spider mites can sort of do well. They don't like hot, dry air, and nor do your orchids. So they're not that common in collections, but if you get them, again, you really need to deal with them and get on top of them quickly, because they can spread quickly. Yeah, so that's the most common bugs you're going to get. Diseases, non-viral diseases, I mean. Virus is a totally different thing. But other diseases you can get the wet rots. That can take the form of black rot or brown rot, like you've seen in a recent video. Really, they are either fungal infections or bacterial infections. It's the bacterial infections that tend to be wet, really wet. You know, they make everything soggy and slimy, and it's usually got quite a nasty smell to it. And if you come across that on your plants, you need to cut out those infected plants and, you know, deal with it, because it will spread fast. Sometimes you'll mistake things, like you can get, on some Cattleyas, you get new growths that just seem to go black and they're not growing well. Well, that can be a lack of calcium, but only you know whether your plants are getting calcium or not. You're the one that supplies the feed. You're the one that put the media in the pot. You know what water you use. And quite honestly, a calcium deficiency can be quite common. It's always assumed that tap water's got some in. Well, soft water's got next to none. Hard water's got far too much and furs your kettle up. So you know, if your kettle furs up, then you've got calcium in your tap water. I don't know whether you can have too much calcium, but I know that TDS readings on some tap water is excessively high and not suitable for orchids. TDS is a general reading. It's just total dissolved salts. It doesn't tell you what's in there. It just tells you how much of things are there to get a reading. So there can be things in tap water that are not too good for your orchids, things like chlorine and possibly fluoride, although I don't know whether that's damaging to plants. But you know, the purer the water source that you start with, the more you have the control of what you put in it, so that you know what your plants are getting. But calcium deficiencies can show up as blackening of new growths, black tips on leaves. That can be for other reasons. It's difficult sometimes to diagnose. But if you know what you're feeding your orchids with and the water you've used, you should know what they're getting. And that's the important thing. It's knowing what you're giving your orchids. My MSU fertiliser is a balanced feed, designed by science and tested, that'll do me, to be used with purer water, you know, like clean rainwater, RO water, distilled water, things like that. And so it's got all the elements in there that should be needed in a balanced form. If you use some form of garden fertiliser or something, the chances are it won't have the calcium and the magnesium in it, because it's expected to be used with tap water. So they're expecting that to be in the tap water. Well, some tap water's got virtually no magnesium in it. It may have the calcium, but it might not have the other bit. But, you know, so, the wet rots, cut it out, just get rid of it. And sometimes you will lose the plant. It's just how it is. And how it gets in there, well, a lot of that sort of thing is airborne, and hopefully less airborne with that thing running. The other types of fungal infections, you can get mold spores germinating and growing in your media, where I've even seen mushrooms growing out of pots, literally. That type of thing tends to do best in older media that's starting to break down. That's how those things grow. That's the environment they like. Moist and decay around, so that they've got something to live on. So, yeah. Algae in pots, I'm still on the fence with that. I don't think it harms the plants, but it can use up nutrients that were designed for the roots of your orchid at such a rate that your orchid not getting as much as it should be, because the algae's having it all. But for algae to flourish, it needs light. So, if you're using clay pots, you might get a bit of algae on the outside, but the inside should be okay. If you use dark pots, plastic pots, things like that, you probably won't get any. You may get a little bit on the surface. Moss, actual live moss growing on the surface of pots, I don't believe that does any harm at all. In fact, it could aid the new roots coming out because it will provide that moist atmosphere directly near where the new roots come out. So that could even be a benefit. What else? Algae. Clear pots are the most prone, obviously. And the algae will stick around the outside of the pot. It'll shut the light out. That may not be a good thing, may not be a bad thing. I'm still on the fence. All I know is that it doesn't look very nice. Excuse me, and that's the reason I don't like it. Whether it's actually damaging to the plant, I'm not so sure, but I certainly don't like the look of it. So a warning shot from somebody who had advice from a knowledgeable source that rubbing alcohol may not sterilize your tools good enough, especially if you're only wiping your tools with it as opposed to dipping them in it and leaving them to soak, which I believe works okay. But like always, what I do, I inform you, and I say this is what I do. You may agree with it, you may disagree with it. I'm happy with both of those views, but do your own work. If you want to find out about 70% rubbing alcohol and its sterilizing properties, it's all there on the internet. It can get very complicated and detailed, but it's there if you want to go and have a read. I'm happy that my trimming tools are sterile when I use them. I'm okay with what I do. But the important thing is that you do something. Yeah, the easiest way to spread things around is non-sterile tools, reusing old pots without cleaning them properly. It's just basic cleanliness. It's pretty obvious, really, but doing nothing to me is not an option. If you trim some roots on a plant and then go ahead and trim some flower spikes on other plants and then cut a few dead leaves off on some different plants, if you don't sterilize those tools, you are pushing your luck. And we can't always have good luck. Sometimes we get some bad luck. That's life. So just a quick chat about some of the things that can mess your orchids up, and a potential warning shot about rubbing alcohol. I don't want everybody running into a panic and blaming Roger. I've told you, if you want to look it up, it's there. I'm okay with it. There are other solutions you can get. There are sterilizing tablets that you use for all your baby equipment and stuff. You dissolve a tablet in some water and it fizzes up and sometimes makes a nice pretty pink liquid, and you dunk all your stuff in there and leave it to soak. Well, that'll work, So there's other ways of doing it. If you use a flame, as I said, try and use a blue flame. If you've got a gas cooker, the flame on that is blue. Blowtorch, that burns blue. Well, most of them do. A candle is not an ideal way. It will do the job, but it will leave black soot all over your tools, and then you've got to clean that off. So, try and use a blue flame if you're going to flame your tools. It will do the job, but make sure, again, you do it thoroughly. You know, if you've just flamed your tools and you can still touch them with your fingers, it's not hot enough. Don't go burning your fingers and blaming Roger. A bit of common sense. But yeah, if you're going to use heat as a sterilising thing, you need heat, not just mucking about. Just, you know, make sure it's hot. I wouldn't recommend taking your nice stainless steel tools up to glowing red, because you'll change the properties of the metal. But yeah, so a bit of common sense and no panic. Just stop and think. What have I got? And can I deal with it? And if it's a virus, there is no way to deal with it. You can keep that plant alive for some time, sometimes forever, and it'll live with it. But it can spread, and it will mainly spread through you know, through damaged tissue that then transfers to other plants. So little warning shot, nice way to start the day, but we all get bugs, we all get a bit of rot now and again. And one thing I do know is that people that grow outside, unless you get real high humidity and standing air, you know, that's still oppressing air that you can get. So you can get those things outside, but it's mainly an enclosed space problem. And you need good air circulation and, if possible, fresh air. There's something about fresh air that deals with a lot of those things and just stops them getting a hold. And that's why at this time of year my air cleaner hopefully is a substitute for my inlet and extractor fan, at which point my air is changed constantly all through the warmer weather and fresh air is brought in. Probably bring some bugs in as well, sucking them in from outside, but anyway, that's what we do. We do the best we can. See you next time.